Hello, and welcome back to the I Want Her Job podcast, where we're featuring curated career conversations with women changing the face of business. My name is Brianne Burrows, and I am the founder and host of I Want Her Job. I am so excited that you've taken the time to join me today. Thank you for pulling some time out of your schedule, whether you're dropping the kids off at school, you're on your lunch break, you're trying to get some time in at the gym, whatever it is that you might be doing. Thanks for taking the time to tune in and listen to episode 3 of our podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different because it's actually a throwback. Some of you may know that I actually used to have a podcast, and those of you who've been listening since episode 1 of this season have heard the story about that. I'm really excited to be bringing back some of my favorite conversations from the old podcast so you can listen to them today. And then I'm doing something really fun because once you hear the throwback episode, the next episode that will follow will be a brand new interview with that person. And today we kick that off with Katie Linendoll. Katie is a friend of mine and someone who I deeply admire. She is a keynote speaker, MC, host, Emmy Award winning TV personality. Katie can do it all. I love following her videos on social media where I get the best tips and tricks about technology. I'm not a technology expert. In fact, I'm the opposite of that. And so I love to scroll along and get her tips and also learn about the coolest new products and gadgets that she comes across. Also, because this conversation was recorded back in 2017, it was actually captured on my iPhone. Because of that, there's no accompanying video. The sound quality isn't as great as what you've heard on some of our recent episodes or even this interview, but I'm excited to have the opportunity to bring this conversation back, and I think it's one that is full of so many nuggets and pieces of wisdom, and I'm excited that you get to listen to it. And don't forget, all of our interviews are available 24/7, along with a decade's worth of career interviews over on iwantherjob.com. So thanks again for taking the time to join me as we rewind all the way back to 2017 and listen to a conversation with Katie. I'm really excited to speak with you because the last time we touched base was back in 2011. And I feel like... Oh my
gosh, it's been that long?
Yes, I feel like so much has changed since then. I feel like tech has evolved so much and your role has evolved. And there's, you were really one of the early adopters in video, but I feel like video has taken on a life of its own the past couple of years.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited to hear a little bit about how you feel your day-to-day has evolved since 2011 and the types of projects that are asked of you.
You know, the first thing that comes to mind is, and probably the craziest is, being in the world of technology and sports and reporting for the last few years. I've been at the Today Show for 6 years and regularly contributing on various outlets from the Weather Channel to Fox News on a weekly basis. So everything's constantly changing in terms of where I'll pop up, which is a blessing. But I was having this epiphany moment because I've spent my entire life in technology, and I was out filming a few weeks ago in Bermuda for a story that I'm working on the Weather Channel, and everything kind of just hit me how much everything's changed in the world of reporting. To your point, I was literally doing a live hit on my iPhone through Facebook Live with the Weather Channel team on a remote island that's 20-mile island, 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, 680 miles from any landmark in the U.S. with a tiny little device, whereas 5-10 years ago, I would have been with a massive crew. Everybody would have a different job. I was blown away by, these moments that kind of take you back, how everything you can do, you're on your own, and with such small technology that has so much power. I think that has been revolutionary, and I think we take it for granted often. But that to me a few weeks ago was one of those moments where it's wow, things have really changed just in the last 3-4 years alone.
Absolutely. And it was so amazing. I saw, I think one of the videos you had posted on Twitter where you were actually down in the ocean.
Yes, I love to do. I am a huge proponent of underwater filming. So I've had my dive certs for quite a few years, and there's not too many of us dive reporters, and it leads to some really unique opportunities. And I will tell you some of my favorites off the top of my head. I've been underwater diving with NASA astronauts. They actually have a mission twice a year where astronauts from NASA, European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, Canadian Space Agency, the best of the best kind of come down and they live underwater anywhere from 6 to 18 days. And what it does is it simulates microgravity. It's about 1/8 of simulation. So it's so crazy to be able to go down as a reporter and see these people that are living underwater. And P.S., they're also just some of the best astronauts in the world. And be able to take that information on at such a high level for that particular training course. They were all working on different technologies underwater. And to really digest it and be able to share it with my audience. The underwater stories that I get to work on are mentally and physically challenging, but it's really changed my outlook on, there's this whole world that's unexplored underwater, and the creatures that I've seen and the people that I've met. And it's been a really exciting part of, what I do and what I report on. And that's actually what I was filming in Bermuda a couple weeks ago. I've been following this one story in particular, and I would talk your ear off if I started to get into it. I was filming the story on this particular fish that's been in invasion, not natural to the Atlantic Ocean, and was thrown in by pet shop owners a few years ago and just spread. I've been following that story for many years, and it's really cool to follow up on it. And even 4 years later, after following up on it, again, the technology has changed. I used to have to rig my own underwater equipment because I shoot, edit, and produce those underwater pieces. And it's just become so much easier, and it's actually put these kind of technologies at people's fingertips that don't need to spend thousands of dollars, which is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And I feel like when you're underwater like that, it must be, very solitary, even though you're around people. So it must be a different way of reporting versus sitting in front of someone or being live on air and reading a teleprompter or interviewing someone. It just has to be such a completely different experience that touches your soul in a different way.
Oh my goodness. And this kind of relationship you have underwater and seeing the different species, and I've been blown away. It's very beautiful. I know that's really geeky, but it's so amazing what you experience underwater in this kind of whole other universe, and these fish that kind of swim up to you. I mean, just imagine like a 200-300 pound grouper or a little puffer fish, and they're in their own little world, and you're down there, and you're like, I got you. Or I'm in your space. I respect your territory. It's really a different environment, but it is challenging physically. I've been out in some really bad storms, and I've been diving at pretty deep depths where I've had some scenarios where things aren't going smooth, and you have a lot of technology on you. You're looking at your dive computers, and it's challenging, and it's an area where you don't have a choice, that you have to remain calm. So it's really been amazing to experience, to your point, underwater.
Yeah, I think that would be so enriching. And I remember seeing one of your tweets the other week that you were talking about the Earth Live special. And it seems like a focus on our environment is something that is growing in importance to you personally, but also to all of us. Do you see, especially as it pertains to technology, do you see covering environment and technology more in the coming years as the world evolves and the temperatures are changing and we're going through all of these crazy experiences that we haven't really had before?
100%. And I think that, I feel there is a responsibility as a new media journalist to be able to tell those stories, especially because it's one thing to be able to give somebody data and statistics. If you give somebody a visual, it's so much more compelling. And to briefly talk about, this one story that I've been working on this piece for the last month, but I've been shooting, editing, and producing in Bermuda. And specifically, as I noted, it's on the lionfish, and this is a fish that was not native to the Atlantic Ocean and was thrown in by pet shop owners. The hypothesis is about 4 to 6 of them were thrown in by a pet shop owner in Florida in the 1980s, and which you wouldn't think would be a big deal, but they populate about 30 to 40,000 eggs every 4 to 5 days. So what happened is they rapidly spread through the Atlantic Ocean, and they have no predators. So imagine now our reefs, the juvenile fish are being eaten. These are optimistic eaters. Mm-hmm. So they're eating these little fish, and they're ruining essentially the ecosystem. And this is a story that I found 4 years ago and did a piece for CNN, and then now I get to follow it up for the Weather Channel. But to be able to share that story and how we as human beings have to fix that problem, and the only way to kill a lionfish is to take it out one by one and spearfish, which I learned how to do.
Oh, wow.
It's very hard, but it's the way to keep the sustainability is it's a very high protein fish. So let's eat them to beat them is kind of the way to go. And there's lionfish tournaments happening all across the Caribbean. Since it's spread from Florida all the way up to, we're seeing it even in Long Island, it's in Massachusetts, out to the Bahamas. It's a huge problem in the Atlantic Ocean. But not only to be able to report about that story, but to follow up on it 4 years later, iRobot, which as we know is the creators of the Roomba and the Scuba and the robotic vacuum cleaners for your home, but also they do military technologies. Here we are 4 years later from when I first covered the piece, and they actually created a robot that is helping to identify the lionfish underwater and be able to suck them up into this tube and then contain them for fishermen. So it was really hard to just spearfish a lionfish one-on-one, but here we have technology now kind of aiding, and robotics that at a very high level aiding our divers and our fishermen be able to catch these fish. So I think a perfect example of how technology can come to the aid, not only in sharing that story and how we report on it, and yes, I can give you the footage, and yes, I can reach an audience of millions of people, which I feel a responsibility to do, but alongside me, I get to report on this robotic that's never been seen before, and here people at iRobot created. So I think it's a perfect example of technology in the environment and how we can help.
Yeah, and I love the storytelling behind that too. Not only the opportunity that you've had to follow up, but it's amazing to think that the company that makes I call it Rosie after the Jetsons, my little Rosie that runs around the house and cleans up all the dust bunnies, is doing something that's dramatically helping to change the landscape of our environment. That just gives me goosebumps.
Exactly.
And it's amazing also to think about that that's just one example, so that there's so many other different research opportunities being done and reporters covering the stories. And I think that it's something that's needed now more than ever as our world is changing. So I also really admire the fact that you are so authentic in all of the pieces that you cover too. Whenever I hear something that you're reporting on, I immediately believe you. There's no shtick about it. And I always really like that about you.
That is the ultimate compliment, because the integrity that I truly have, I do not take a story unless I'm absolutely passionate about it. And I probably spend too much time on my pieces. It's interesting in the world of journalism where things are going, and you're often pushed to be the first person to get something out, and you're cranking out stories and cranking out stories. I refuse to go in that direction. I have to put a lot of effort and research into every one of my pieces, or even every gadget that I test. I can't go on the Today Show and have 7 products that I'm showing, and even though they have about 30 to 45 seconds a piece, I can't tell you how many websites I've crashed. And not to say that, oh, that's amazing. It is amazing, but it shows you the responsibility that you have, that if you tell people on air to purchase that product and it works, it better darn well work.
Right.
And I think, being able to showcase different technologies or different stories, again, that word responsibility kicks in, where you have to have an integrity behind what you do, and you have to be believable. It should be innate. You're
the Oprah of tech, crashing websites.
Hilarious. I love it.
So let's talk a little bit about this grind you go through. It's something that a lot of working women are finding themselves dealing with these days, but you are constantly on the road. You're in airports, you're traveling. How much travel do you do on a monthly basis?
Yes, I'm calculating about 250 days a year on the road, which is a little insane. I often wake up and what airline am I in? You wake up from a little map on the window and you're like, oh, I forgot I was en route, or what hotel am I in? It's a blessing, though. I have to tell you, I grew up in very humble roots in Erie, Pennsylvania, and I don't think I took my first flight until I was maybe 20. So we always did lots of road trips, and there were 6 people in our family, and of the 4 tourists. And now to be able to explore the world and it's really changed me as a person in being in, I reference Bermuda and some of the most beautiful islands in the world, and I think of places like the Caymans and the Faroe Islands, but also I've been in some of the poorest parts of the world, like Kibera, Kenya, and going to these facilities in these places where it's really humbling, and it's really changed my life in terms of getting that experience and being on the road.
Similar to being under the ocean, it must just shift your perspective as well.
Yes, and I think back to the story I was filming, one that really stood out to me, and being on the road so much, but I really hit home in terms of changing me. It was the one I was just referencing in Kibera, which is factually the second poorest part of the entire world. And, I went to a number of schools there, and I went on this trip that I self-funded to filmed for CNN at the time, and they imagine in some of the poorest places in the world where they're actually using e-readers as new technologies to gain education in their curriculum. And I was so blown away by this story that this one company, World Reader, could go into the poorest parts of the world, and it actually makes sense to give them e-readers because they can download thousands of books that they actually care about and that are in their curriculum and that can help them grow. And I'm looking at these children, and they're so happy and so grateful. And even though they don't have a lot, it was really rewarding to see that scene. I ended up actually funding one of the schools over there and giving them full e-readers. But because we always it was interesting to think, people always send books to Africa. Like, that sounds really good. It's actually really expensive to actually send a physical book to Africa, for example. And typically they're books that people don't want to read. Like, the history of Idaho was one of the small libraries. I'm like, I know people in Idaho that don't want to read about the history of Idaho. Now these kids can actually read books, and they were telling me how they realize that there's life outside of where they are. You know, you're in slums, you're in high poverty areas where there's a lot of unfortunate crimes and rape, and it's just terrible circumstances. But how prized an education is to areas that, you know, we take for granted. So something like that has dramatically changed my life. I can tell you, when I came back from that particular trip, I remember being in the subway here in New York City, and this girl was like annoyed with me on the subway because I had sat right next to her or something. There was like a really, really tight train. I usually don't sit next to people. I hate that. But she was like, and I'm like, dude, you have no idea. Like, that's the biggest problem you're dealing with today. Like, you know, when you go and experience these scenarios where this one family invited me into their home, and they spent 2 months' salary just to make us dinner and buy us soda. And I was it's completely gut-wrenching, and you just feel like you can't do enough. But it definitely changes your perspective, and it really stays with you that's changed my life since I've been there years ago.
Well, and it's one of those things too, I feel like the world is becoming more globalized, but at the same time, we're also becoming more in our own bubbles, you know, whether it's the customized news that shows up on our Google feed or our Facebook feeds. And so in a way, we're becoming more solitary, yet we're also kind of rapidly expanding at the same time. So
that's a really great point. Yes.
It's interesting.
And I think, you know, it makes me think, as you say that the real thing that can change your perspective is travel. Getting out there and putting yourself out there in different uncomfortable environments, and even diving, to get back to that. Like, that's not so, the first time you do it, you're like, I don't want to be doing this right now. I just want to go home. Like, I don't want to be just pushing yourself outside the boundary. It is what is going to build your character, hands down.
So it's almost travel, and also that thought of getting uncomfortable.
Yes.
And out of your element. Yes.
And there's that moment where we all experience, whether it's going to an event that we don't feel like, you know, comfortable at, or being underwater, or being in a different city where, you know, it doesn't feel like you really fit in. There's that moment where you go, this sucks, I don't want to be here. And then you're like, no, I'm going to man up and I'm going to get through this. And it's always the best decision.
Absolutely. I know that, being someone who moved from a small town in Montana to Los Angeles without any friends. It's one of those things. It was a tough experience, but it was one of the best experiences of my life too. And I'm sure you encountered something very, very similar with your path as well, going from a small town to a big city.
Well, and the easy thing for you to have done was to just leave.
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
the easy cop out. And it's like, no, I'm going to make myself go through this, and now look at where you are. Like,
absolutely. I did like the thought in the back of my head. I always had this safety net. Like, I can always go home. Home is always there. Like, it's good to know that it's there, but I never chose to act on it. So
that's a good point. I always play the worst case scenario. And anytime I feel uncomfortable or worried about something, like, you know, as I've gotten older and I feel like a lot wiser, I always say, okay, I'm worrying about this situation right now, whether it's personal or professional. What's the worst case scenario that could happen? And when I start to play that game, and I can rule out the worry so fast from my head, because I'm like, the worst case scenario usually isn't that bad. Like, it's not that terrible. If it does happen, which it's not going to happen, most likely 99.9%, I'll work through it.
Right.
So I think, you know, often we have to play these mind games with ourselves and get out of our own anxieties.
That's a great mindset to have. And I think it's so easy for that anxiety to sneak up, especially when you're trying something new or you're stretching out from your comfort zone.
Yep.
On that topic, what would you say are some of your daily practices or philosophies that help contribute to your success?
Oh goodness, every day for me is so different. I also think right now, I'm going through this. I'm constantly learning and challenging myself. I wish I could the only time I say I could clone myself, I would love to, is to, because there's not enough hours in the day. I'm an obsessive sponge. I could never take in, and that's just for me personally. I love to learn as much as possible. For example, I'm very into my piano. I take sign language courses. Right now I'm taking a handstand class. I take gymnastics. Anything I can push outside my boundaries and just learn, I'm obsessive about. So I have my own little list of things that I want to check off, but make sure that I actually legitimately check them off. So learning, you're never too old to keep, learning something new. So I think that's important to me. I've been a big proponent, I'll get it out, of sleep now, which I think is very important. About a year and a half ago, I started working alongside a sleep company that really blew my mind. They created the first all-natural sleep device that puts you to sleep with binaural tones. Essentially, this MIT PhD team of engineers, they're the one guy's daughter. He's also a professor at the University of Colorado. She was 17 at the time, and she ended up in the ER because she was getting prescribed so much medicine to try to help fall asleep due to chronic sleep issues. Mm-hmm. And I think even that's such on a high spectrum of sleep issues. I think we all deal with sleep problems, and there's one category we fall into, whether it's overthinking at night and not being able to slow down, or just insomnia, or not being able to wake up at the right point and you feel really groggy. We all kind of have our own sleep issues. And as I started working, the sleep team that I had met blew my mind. I asked to be a consultant on board, and having learned so much about sleep and what it does for our body, what it does for our beauty, what it does for our mental health, has been really eye-opening to me. And I'm a big proponent of, if I'm tired at the end of the night, I'm going to shut it down. And I think we live in a society where it's glamorized to say, oh, I only got 2 hours of sleep, or, I worked 80-hour week. It's that's actually really dumb. That's not productive. So I've been a huge proponent of trying to get as much sleep as possible, obviously within reason, but mm-hmm. You're talking to somebody that used to get 2.5, 3 hours and do that for weeks on end, and then it's not healthy. And I think, we're living in this capsule, this body that we're given, and we need to take better care of it. So sleep has been a huge one for me, in short.
Absolutely. And I feel too, is a lot of people, to your point, carry it around as a badge of honor to say, I worked this many hours, or I missed this much sleep, but really it's something that affects you on a fundamental level. And they say that, if you go without sleep, it's the equivalent of being drunk, as you go throughout your day. So,
oh my gosh, research, I'm not a big statistics or research, because I never got called for a poll, so I tend to hate polls. But how many times, can we see data and research about, athletes that perform so much better when they get an extra hour of sleep? Or you should actually, if you're feeling tired, it's more, we know this, more productive to go to bed when you're feeling tired and wake up a little earlier to get refreshed and be more sharp. It's so obvious, but, we spend so much time on some stuff that isn't as important, but as opposed to taking care of our bodies. And I think we're in this kind of wake up awakening period, which I love in terms of our mental and physical health.
I think that's a great way to put it, because I feel like kind of as time goes by, we get so distracted by everything, by our iPhones, by TV, by everything that's happening in our lives, by work. Our mind is constantly running, but our body gives us those clues and those signals. It's like, hey, you need to sleep, or hey, you need to go see the doctor and take care of yourself.
Absolutely. So, and that's another thing I'm very big on. It's just really staying engaged and staying connected to our own selves. And I mean that not digitally connected. Mm-hmm. We need to trust our instincts. We have gut feelings. It's amazing. And subjectively speaking, when you trust those and you listen to yourself and you give yourself some headspace and you put the device away, I'm a big proponent of that. And I think it's something I hope we're all getting a little bit back to, because we realize, to your point, we're so distracted these days, and it's a scary place to be.
Absolutely. Being this tech expert and someone who really forecasts trends, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what you see is a trend for those interested in careers and jobs to keep an eye on in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see waves of technology happening, and the first thing that comes to my mind in terms of trends that are happening right now that I think could really be successful, and that I'm really personally excited about, definitely the world of augmented reality and virtual reality. And even if that doesn't particularly pertain to you because it is a little niche, I think it's worth everybody just knowing on a surface level what exactly it is. And I speak often about virtual reality because it's one of the biggest passion projects that I'm working on right now. I've followed VR, as we call it, since its infancy, and I actually went to the facility in which VR was created by Lucky Palmer and got a nice little education many years ago about the tech. And while I was there and experiencing VR for the first time, I was actually training in a Navy ship. And it got so intense and immersive that I forgot that this entire camera crew was filming me. And I felt like I was in this other world. And I felt, yes, this would be great for entertainment and for concerts, of which VR is known for, gaming. But on the flip side of that, I actually saw this kind of realm of VR being integrated into other areas. And I specifically thought of, I've been working in pediatric cancer as a volunteer for 6 years with a number of agencies. And now I sit on the board of the Back Hole Foundation, which is like the most important thing that I do. We provide support for clinical research, funding for clinical research. And now we actually just started, back to my point, when I was in VR, I thought of the kids. Mm-hmm. Because when kids go in to the hospital, when they have neuroblastoma, for example, a form of pediatric cancer, they have long days in the hospital and you're bored. Like, it's radiation, it's chemo, there's a lot of sitting around, and it's probably the worst case scenario of time on your hands that you could probably think of. So long story short, with the Back Hole Foundation, it's an honor of my little BFF. I worked with so many amazing little kids in the hospital over the years. And Cole Winnefeld, he passed away 2 years ago, almost to the day now. It's an honor of him and his legacy. So we started implementing virtual reality into the pediatric cancer hospitals across the country. And I can't tell you the success of this program. It has been unreal to hear what's coming out of both the management and also the kids and the doctor's side of how successful it is for a child to put on a VR headset and to get lost in the moment, especially in times when they're sitting around and things couldn't be worse. So I've put in programs to the VR headsets. Example, they could be skateboarding, they could be skiing, they could be on a beach, they could watch a little movie. It's been so cool to experience, and fortunately, God willing, we will be finalizing our contract this week with a large technology company, so we can actually we have a waiting list right now for hospitals across the country. It's the coolest thing in terms of VR, but you really have to experience the immersion to understand what I'm talking about, because It's one thing to talk about virtual reality. Once you see it and experience it, and you're on a tightrope across two buildings that are in hundreds of feet in the air, you're like, whoa, I just feel like I'm somewhere else. So that to me has been the coolest technology out on the market that I hope succeeds. I hope does not become the next 3D TV, but it's really about getting in people's hands.
Well, I'm so excited to hear about that, and they definitely have such an amazing advocate in you, and it's really heartwarming to hear all of these ways that you're giving back. And like I said at the beginning of the conversation, you're just so authentic and such a good person, and I wish there were 1,000 more Katies out there in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. That's the nicest thing ever.
Well, I really enjoyed speaking with you today, and I was just curious if there was anything else you wanted to touch on that I didn't talk about that you wanted to get across to our listeners.
Well, I thank you for getting in the Back Hole Foundation. It's
of course.
backhole.foundation if anyone wants to visit that. It's been amazing in the world of technology and all the different things that I get to cover. And we talk about how, these traveling experiences change who you are as a person and build character. Nothing has changed my life more than the families and the kids that I've gotten to work with. And it gives me chills talking about it even. Like, just in this terrible scenario of pediatric cancer, but one that what can we do with technology to better help this kind of situation? And that's been the most rewarding of all. Oftentimes people talk about robots taking over jobs. Like, I like to focus on the positive and how technology can be better aid and we can work alongside with and create positive scenarios. And I think the Back Hole Foundation is probably the coolest example I've ever had to work with in tech.
And was there a personal situation that led to your interest in pediatric cancer, or was it something that you just always felt a bond with and something that you wanted to support?
I saw a TV segment on New York local station here in New York City it was 6 years ago, on this foundation that was working with Sloan Kettering is one of the big hospitals in New York City, and kids and families come from all over the world to get treatment here. And I literally was like at tears watching this segment of this foundation that helps the families kind of adjust to New York City. And, they give them visitors when they come throughout the day. And I was like, I felt a bond immediately. And in that moment, I emailed the individual, and next thing you know, I was like a big sister to especially all the boys. They love when Crazy Katie comes in because I bring them toys, and I'll tell you, technology with 3DSs and iPhones and really cool new stuff, even Legos and the digital and the physical world of Lego stuff coming through. They get so excited, and it's not hard. Like, I knew, in having worked with them for so many years, it's been a blast. But it was that one TV segment, and understanding kids and being, yes, Crazy Katie as I'm known. And unfortunately, I've watched a lot of my little BFFs pass away over the years. But I'm hoping that what we're doing at the foundation is we're doing clinical research. So I've found that in working closely with these families, a lot of people that try the more of the trials, like the riskier, that may not work, but they could work, they've had a lot of success with that. And I allude to Cole Winnefeld, who the foundation's named after. We found with him, he lived 5 very healthy extra years just from a clinical trial. So that's 100% of our proceeds go to that. And I think that's really exciting to know that one of those trials could be the one to make the difference.
Yep. It just takes one.
Yep.
At I Want Her Job, we are mentors, risk takers, motivated by helping everyday women, goal setting, change leading, and ambitious, storytellers and story lovers, invested not in one, but in the whole. If you're with me, please share this podcast with someone in your life who's going through a season of change. All you have to do on iTunes is click on those 3 little dots in the upper right corner and select Share Episode. And if you're on YouTube, simply send the link. And while you're there, if you'd leave a review, I'd really appreciate it, because this podcast can only grow through people just like you, through listeners like you, through viewers like you, who are sharing this with the loved ones in your life. Thank you. Your time is the greatest gift that you could give me, and I'm very grateful for that. I hope something in today's show resonated with you, and that it inspires you to inspire others. Keep making it happen.